Welcome back to Trending in Education. Brandon Jones, Michael Palmer, and myself, Dan Stratford, here with you. And it's that time of year. It's time to talk about the Gartner Hype Cycle, the 2018 edition. We will get to that momentarily. Brandon, though, are you hyped? Are you ready
I'm
to
so
talk?
hyped. It's August. It's time to get smarter with Gartner. I love this time of year. It's my I get hyped. We should do a Gartner Hype Cycle about the hype cycle. Like, I am at the absolute peak of excitement. That's not what it's called, but that's that's where I am.
Yeah.
I will never trough out.
You're at the acme of amped.
I am at the acme. I'm the zenith of zany. I'm excited. I'm ready to get this on.
And Mike, for preparation, you said that you actually listened back to last year's episode.
I did. It was pretty great. A lot of it, it's a little bit of deja vu though, because this morning I listened to our 2017 Gartner Hype Cycle show, and I have a feeling it's going to sound very similar to this year.
I think it's good.
It started with
definitely going to talk about Smart Dust for the third year in a row.
You always you have to. It's like
still there, baby.
Those of you who've heard Brandon, if you love Trending in Education take on the Gartner Hype Cycle, Brandon will talk about Smart Dust, among many other things.
Talking about it makes me smart dusty.
Yeah.
Like it's I get a little of a clump. I love Smart Dust. It's there again.
I will say the other thing that was interesting to me was that last year when we did the Hype Cycle show, I was much fuzzier on the blockchain than I am now. And I know Brandon last year was pretty fluent with the blockchain.
I know me some blockchain.
Yeah. So, and then we, just right before we started recording here, we were comparing notes on digital twins, so like it is interesting to first be introduced to a word or an idea through the Gartner Hype Cycle, and then to be forced every year to come back to it actually does solidify your understanding of this thing. And it is also like it's remarkable to me how much we do learn without noticing. So like that was one of the things when I looked at it, listened to it from last year, I was like, wow, these ideas were really foreign to me a year ago, and now like I'm probably around where you were around the blockchain a year ago, and you were kind of ahead of curve. And that's why I do love these. Aside from just getting zany, getting wacky, looking at the language, the trough of disillusionment, we love that. Forget about it. Peak of inflated expectations. If you don't know Gartner Hype Cycle, you better ask someone.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, this is a fun show.
For people who are not familiar with the back catalog and not familiar with the Gartner Hype Cycle, is it worth us just talking a little bit about what the cycle is?
Please. Yep.
So there are 5 stages in the Gartner Hype Cycle, and it is a curve that plots emerging technologies on this 5-stage curve. And if you can imagine, I'm using my hands, which is great for this medium.
Yeah.
It goes up from the innovation trigger.
Yep.
Is the first part, like where these things didn't exist, and to get on the Gartner Hype Cycle, they have to be triggered. So that's what starts them off. They move up. This is the great part in the life cycle when it's like full of expectations.
It's the hype show.
It's the yes,
Yeah.
something like that.
Something like that.
And it climbs and climbs and climbs to the absolute tip, which is the peak, as Mike said, the peak of inflated expectations.
Right. It's like the roller coaster. It's like you're on the Cyclone at Coney Island. You're at a famous.
Like click, click,
you're
click,
climbing
click,
up.
click, yeah, and then about to go whee, down in the
yeah.
next stage, the trough of disillusionment.
Oh.
And really, I think that they should have the trough. Just that describes the nadir there. I think that the trough. There should be another name.
Yeah.
Gartner. Get Smartner. There should be a name for the slope, the decline.
Yes.
But it goes down that to get then to the trough of disillusionment. And then some things, although for 2018, it's kind of a rough year. We'll talk about this later.
Yeah.
Not everything gets out of that slope and that decline out of the trough into the next stage, which is the peak of enlightenment.
Right.
And then finally, there is sort of the sad outcome for all technologies, or those that make it out. They get to the plateau of productivity.
It's very poetic.
It is. It is. So that's the shape of the curve. I think it's helpful to know. And I think, we'll talk about a lot of the individual items that appear on the curve and how it compares to last year.
Yeah.
But I think it's beyond my just amped upness for this show every year, and plus one, Mike, to the comments about it's actually an always be learning moment for at least me.
Mm-hmm.
I think this stuff, it also like sort of makes sense. Like this is how things work. Like people get excited about things.
Yeah.
And then they sort of reach their maximum level of excitement. Then people stop being as excited.
Right.
And some of those things go away.
Sure.
And then some of them make it out. Like that's like how the world works, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Although I will say my take on the hype cycle is evolving over time, where now I realize there's a good amount of pseudoscience in the hype cycle.
For sure.
So like they're putting it on a graph, but like the graph doesn't really correlate to much of anything. It's like some ideas that kind of make sense that they put on a graph, and then it looks like a chart.
Sure does.
But it's all about predictions that aren't really going to get measured. And there's not really a tremendous amount of math underneath.
Yeah, is there? That's a good
chart.
question. Like, do we know? Does Gartner? Is it like like Billy Gartner and like Susie Gartner get together and they say, this year I think we're gonna put AR, augmented reality, in this spot.
Yeah.
Or like, how much science is there behind this?
There's definitely a ton of analysis, but then the analysis turns into something that can get plotted onto the hype cycle.
Right.
That's
what I'm wondering. Like
may
at the
not
end,
be as pure. Maybe some little more art and pseudoscience. Pseudoscience.
Yeah, sway, swadio.
Quasi.
That was a Phil Collins song.
It's quasi accurate.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well,
but
it's interesting.
It's thought provoking, and then if you're not familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, it's awesome when you first start to understand it.
For sure.
And then it's really cool to come back to every year. So
yeah.
I love it every year.
Me too.
But now I'm also like, I want more. And we talked about it last year too, where like the fact that they plot everything on a single graph when clearly this should be like animated. I think last year we were talking about how it should be like a 4D graphic that kind of some smart dust involved, whatever it is, it like morphs and changes over time. But yeah, it's anybody who wants like to be cool person who knows about some future technology, you should check it out, because all the language we're going to be dropping on you right now, you could be dropping on other people and sound like you know what's going on.
For sure.
And that's a good thing.
You can view the hype cycle at Gartner.com. Obviously, Google 2018 hype cycle, and you'll find it. There is a good article as well from the Register out of the United Kingdom about what fell off from 2017 to 2018. We'll sprinkle that in during the conversation here. But that's, to Brandon's point, another sort of part of the cycle they don't talk about, what's no longer there. Like where do those things go to a farm in upstate New York, I would assume. But the big thing here to point out, I want to say as well to Brandon's point about the cycle, is it also does years in the plotting. So it gives you like 0 to 2 years, 2 to 5 to 10 years, and more than 10 years per each of these items as well while you're looking at it. So just another thing to consider as you walk through. So Brandon, as you are seemingly the hypest of hyped here, we have 5 takeaways from Gartner this year. It's a list of sorts. I don't know if you want to dive into one individual topic or rattle them all off together, but AI is omnipresent here. And there's something about biohacking we'll get to in a little while, which I'm not sure I'm entirely comfortable with. But what do you see here, Brandon? What's your first takeaway from the 2018 Gartner Hype Cycle?
I'll read the trends.
Sure.
And then maybe we can editorialize on each of them, but I'll just read them because,
the 5 buckets.
The 5 trends.
Yeah.
So there are 5. Number 1, democratized AI.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just a word about what that means. This is AI not just in sort of small, esoteric, and affluent, accessible only to affluent folks.
Mm-hmm.
This is AI, this sort of pervasiveness of AI. I think is another way to say that.
Kind of like the equivalent of when the personal computer came to everybody's
Correct.
homes. Now artificial intelligence comes into everybody's lives.
It does.
Everywhere.
Number 2, digitalized ecosystems. So this is blockchain is an example of digitalized ecosystems.
Mm-hmm.
Digital twins, which we may come back and talk to. Digital twins weird. Three, this is the one that Dan likes, is it's not just biohacking, it's do-it-yourself biohacking.
Yeah. That's my problem.
So I'm not sure how where each of the sub trends that make up this trend fall on the cycle.
Yep.
Because there are things like artificially cultured and biologically inspired muscle.
Sure.
I think that's different than tracking. Like there's a lot of like the smart devices that track your biometrics. Like that's I think pretty prevalent.
Right.
There's some pretty far out stuff in there too.
But there's a lot of, that's also where like home CRISPR kits would fit, right? Like where I want to start hacking my own DNA.
Yes.
Where like I've seen some early press about that, and that trend, I think that's what Dan is.
That's where I'm concerned. Yes.
Yeah. Likewise, it is crazy that, you could just get a kit and just start experimenting.
Yeah.
Hacking, like literally hacking the strands of your own DNA just to see what happens.
Yeah, there is a thing called grinder biohacking.
Yeah.
That's GRINDER.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So I'm not sure that's the like it's getting into your own DNA and just like cooking it up in the lab and seeing what happens.
It's like Breaking Bad meets Watson and Crick.
Breaking Brad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Watson and Crick. Yeah. Trend number 4, this is of 5, is transparently immersive experiences.
Sure.
So this is like all of the it's transparently immersive. All of the smart home stuff, like all of the environment around you being IoT, Internet of Things, and sort of ready to engage with you as a human in new ways. And then trend number 5 is ubiquitous infrastructure. So this is the limitations in the past of processor speed and storage capabilities are just no longer a limiting factor in many cases. So we have now tremendous capability in terms of cloud computing and the like that just changes the infrastructure environment. So those are the trends.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting because last year I think they only had 3. So I do feel, and I feel like they're doing a better job grouping into these categories to get like macro trends. Because I thought, and I'm not. I think maybe in 16 there was even less curation of the trends, or at least we were less tuned into it.
Yep.
So I do like this. I like that they're starting to group them, and that kind of gets back to my point about like, multiple graphics, multiple curves, like you could put all the things that are within the same time period and the same trend category that you just talked about, and talk about how they're moving and like going deep. I know Gartner does have some webinars coming up towards the end of August where they go into some depth on these topics. So maybe that's really where they get into it. And a lot of what we're looking at is just sort of the first releases of this. But it's a hype cycle for emerging technology, so you want to get on it early,
for sure, and
then ride it as far as it will go. Which of these 5 do you think has the most legs, or you're the most? Well, I guess the most legs definitionally would be the biohacking. Yeah. Or robots.
You should see all the legs I'm gonna have after I biohack myself.
For sure.
What the question is, which of these is most awesome? Am I most excited about?
Yeah, which of these do you think is going to be the most relevant to say the next few years, next three to 5?
I think you can make a good argument for a number of them. I guess the argument I would make for would be for AI. I think that AI 4X is going to, we've talked about this before, but I think introducing AI into systems is going to be like introducing electricity to them. That it's going to just create new categories of product and experiences and industries, just the way that adding electricity to anything did that same thing too. So, and I think that the democratization is a good word, where, when electricity became prevalent and, effectively a utility that was cheap enough, even in its early days, like it changed everyone's lives. Like it didn't just change the 1% of the 1% of the 1%'s lives. And I think the same thing is going to happen with AI. So there is, I will say, this is one of the sort of humorous, you be the judge, sides. They have called out on the hype cycle is level 4. What is it called? Autonomous driving level 4.
Yes.
Without explanation.
It's in the what's it called? The slide. We need to come up with a name for like when you're sliding down.
Yeah.
Sliding down into the trough. It's on its way into the trough.
Now, but what's curious is that autonomous driving level 5 is climbing up.
For sure.
It's going up the Coney Island roller coaster.
Yeah. And I think part of that might be like the level 4 is where there've been a few accidents with human assisted.
Is that level 4?
What's level 4 is high automation. Yeah. I found it at Car and Driver. Level 3 is conditional automation.
Like really good cruise control.
Got it.
In the right conditions, the car can manage most aspects of driving.
Also known as really good cruise control.
There it is.
Yeah.
High automation is the car can operate without human input or oversight, but only under select conditions. And then full automation is level 5.
What's level 1?
I assume human driving. I will scroll.
Manual transmission.
Driver assistance.
Autonomous driving level 1 sounds like that should be not just human.
I think, no, it was automated windshield wipers. So
it's like parallel parking is what it is. So like under perfect conditions, under human supervision, the car can do some things.
Right.
Dan, you know a lot about this.
Google is my friend.
So, but I think it's funny that that these are offered up on this curve in very different places. But while I think that the promise or the promise or threat of an AI where it's just a robot controlled future is at least very far off, if not probably not going to happen in the way that sort of science fiction-y we imagine it. I do think that AI for X is going to be a game changer and a life changer for humans.
Yeah, and it's pretty fundamental in a lot of the other. I imagine the self-driving cars, automated driving. A lot of these things are, to your point, are built on a foundation of more accessible, evolved AI, intelligent agents, deep learning, machine learning. So that makes a ton of sense. Just real quick on the automated driving, one of the major questions there, it's sort of getting back to where you were going, Brandon, is like bottom up versus top down automated driving. So like the idea of like and I think level 4, at least as we understand it right now, is still generally bottom up, meaning like you're gradually taking the agency away from the human and figuring out what can be sort of safely automated over that time. The other approach is more top down, and I think level 5 typically is thought of as more top down. So like to get to level 5, you almost can't have the root assumption that there's a human who you'll take stuff away from. Instead, the root metaphor is like, imagine that there is no human at all, no driver, and design with that intent. And that's why I think they're on either side, where like when you still, and that's almost, I would rationalize that to the idea that when you go bottom up, you're going to sort of hit a peak, and that's going to send you into a trough of disillusionment.
Gartner likes that.
Until these democratized AIs develop to the point that AI for automated driving is purely top down, in which case we reach level 5.
I like it.
It might even be correct. I don't know.
I mean, it doesn't matter if it's correct. I think it sounds nice.
Yeah, it sounded all right.
As we go through here, it is intriguing. Is it the hero's journey where it jumps straight to plateau of productivity, I believe? So one of the critiques in this Register article is about how things can just disappear from the hype cycle. And to Mike's point, there isn't a ton out there of how Gartner decides where things land. There isn't much on their calculations. There isn't much on back-end math. It's sort of presented as just what it is. Here's the hype cycle. But Brendan, to your point about the level 4 and level 5, they also have blockchain on here twice. And we talked about that a lot last year. Mike brought it up, and there's blockchain, and then there's blockchain specifically for data security. We've seen, cryptocurrency was built on top of blockchain, crash over the past few months. That's obviously entered a trough in and of itself. But from your point of view, Brandon, can you see the separation of these two as two separate things to track? Or it feels as though blockchain is blockchain to me, that it shouldn't be too separate.
No, I think blockchain isn't blockchain. I mean, blockchain, I think you could argue that anything is all of its things in terms of how you represent it on the graph. And so I think that is like something that Gartner probably has to grapple with, and they've made the choice to break things out and put them in multiple places. But, blockchain, that construct and concept applying to, as we talked about last year, like really any service industry that is today using a centralized way of recording, and is in many cases commercializing that service. Blockchain is disruptive for anything. So I think that blockchain for X, I just talked about AI for X. Like there's maybe not exactly as many X applications of blockchain, but certainly the blockchain as what underpins cryptocurrency is just one of the many applications of blockchain. And so I do think it's appropriate, if Gartner decides it's appropriate to break out anything into multiple things, then it's appropriate to do so with blockchain. If it decides that everything must be only one thing, then obviously make a different call.
I agree. I think the other thing that's interesting to me is more from a language perspective, using the definite article "the" in front of the blockchain, similar to how the internet was a big deal, and even the Facebook, which became Facebook. The internet is still pretty much the internet. It's occasionally the internet, just internet. And here it's not called the blockchain; it's blockchain.
Because it's a technology, it's a capability.
But the blockchain, sort of as like a monolithic thing, is what I'm seeing as on its way into the trough, in that, like, thinking of it as this monolithic thing, also thinking of it as really cryptocurrency, but I'm gonna say blockchain because I kind of don't know the difference. It's also the primary application of the blockchain
today,
was crypto. But then to say that the emerging needs around data security and the application to like the next big problem that maybe is similar to the opportunity around cryptocurrency, that's the next level that I think Gartner's trying to get to. And I think that level of distinction is interesting. Although they decided to drop the like
they did.
And I guess last year maybe it just was blockchain too.
I think it's blockchain.
But I've heard blockchain likened to the internet in the 90s. So like where we are today is similar to where we were with the internet in the 90s, which is why saying, you would imagine over time they're saying blockchain for data security. To your point about AI for everything, there probably will be select cases. It's probably not as broad an application of that technology set, but there will be some really unique areas where, like voting is another one. I've heard like art provenance too, like trying to figure out the veracity of the source of anything, like, which is similar to currency too. Like how do you sort of validate that stuff? We've learned a lot about blockchain, which is an indication that it's become much more central, so much so that there's sort of aspects of it that are now past the peak of inflated expectations.
And I would bet on blockchain getting out of the trough. I think that one's going to get to a plateau of productivity, and I think that we're going to find that blockchain powers a lot of things in the future. Although it is, and we mentioned this a little before, but the 2018 is a little bleak in terms of what makes it out. So, although to the point of things disappear, sort of, there isn't. I think we talked about this one last time about desktop printers, or like personal computers are not on. They're not on the hype cycle, right? It's not like. Or like dishwashers, right? Like those were amazing when they came out. I'm still hyped about my dishwasher in New York City. But so not everything stays on this curve forever. But there's nothing that actually has made it out on 2018's curve into the slope of enlightenment or the plateau of productivity. So as opposed to last year, where VR, virtual reality, was moving up the slope of enlightenment. This year, nothing is.
And also there's more to that story. What happened to virtual reality?
Who knows?
Is virtual reality blissfully partying in the valley beyond?
I guess.
I don't know. Like, what happened what happened to virtual reality, Dan?
It's funny you said Valley Beyond, because I was going to use that as the reference point for things falling off of the hype cycle before, but I decided against it. So I'm glad that we still were able to work in the Westworld reference there. I do have the question around the movement on something like augmented reality. We've talked in the past about Pokemon Go, about those sort of games. It does again seem like something that will resurrect itself in different places, different ways of doing things. But Mike, do you see that being maybe passed by virtual reality? Like, is there a place where you see augmented reality falling by the wayside? Like, I'm trying to think of a technology. It wasn't DVDs, it was the laser discs. Like, laser discs were supposed to be the next big fad and got overtaken by DVDs and Blu-rays. Do you see augmented reality possibly, disappearing to an extent over the next few years?
No, and I don't see virtual reality disappearing either. So I think the point about the right side of the hype curve is a good one, where like there's a lot more complexity to the pathways that might emerge on the other side of the trough of disillusionment, where like if you were overhyped and then you bottom out, you still may wind up being like an effective technology that's around in the future, but you're probably not. Gartner's going to stop talking about you because they're trying to be more ahead of curve, like what's emerging. And I feel like that's kind of what's happening with virtual reality. The fact that augmented reality is sort of stuck in the trough down there, and now mixed reality is following on the heels of augmented reality. In essence, those three things are so deeply related that the fact that some of them are still on the curve, one of them, virtual reality, is no longer mentioned on the curve. It's more like when you start looking at the broader trend of, layering into your reality, like a digital alternative or digital extension of your reality, that's becoming a more common component in gaming. We've talked a lot about the learning applications of that, where like, how can you learn through augmented reality, through mixed reality? And then mixed reality is really interesting too, in that like you can design environments where you can, in some cases, it would be a purely virtualized experience. In other cases, it would be augmented reality. In other cases, there would be nothing there. That's a big trend. And I think Gartner is just trying to get very specific around, if you're investing in technology, if you're looking at the venture opportunities, if you want to start a company or explore a technology, they want to let you know what's early and then what's on the uptrend, so that you get in early. And then also when something's starting to bottom out, they try to signal it's coming or it just came, in which case you may want to hold off or take advantage of that opportunity. So I do think it's a really interesting resource for people who are trying to be on trend and trying to be ahead of trend so that you make smart choices. And I think that strikes me as their primary intent in putting this thing together. So like how productive technologies come once they become mainstream doesn't really seem like the focus of this report. So I wouldn't make a lot of assumptions around where AR, VR, these things are going. Although it is interesting that AR just got stuck for whatever reason.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think, to your point, that they're so deeply interconnected. Sort of XR, where if you consider like AR, VR, and mixed reality all part of the same sort of space.
Yeah.
That's not that different from one of the trends for this year. It's the transparently immersive experiences, right? Like this is talking more about sort of IoT connected things, electronic whiteboards, making your workspace better. But like there's the difference between how sort of technology is going to engage with things and how a heads-up display of that could change, whether it's an augmented or virtual reality way. Like those things are actually kind of related too. So I guess maybe everything relates to everything and then nothing is can stand alone. I think maybe that is actually one of the greater points of the technology revolution that we're in, is that in fact all of this tech is related to all of this tech.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would agree with Mike to your question, Dan. Like, is AR done? Like, I think pretty decidedly no.
Yep.
Some of these other things, like we'll see, but I'm optimistic around that.
I also think it's interesting, to your point, Brandon, like thinking about which of these things, which are maybe in different macro trends of the 5 that they describe, but that you start knitting them together. Like that's really where some cool innovation will happen too. Because like these sort of parallel development paths are happening for, say, like artificial intelligence and transparently immersive environments, AR, VR, you start thinking about how could you connect those things together and put them in an autonomous vehicle that's running on a blockchain powered traffic grid. I mean, forget about it. You at least have good sci-fi, right?
Sure.
So like if you're a science fiction writer.
Yeah, it's like a Black Mirror episode. Like all of this is like underpinning to Black
Can we have a positive outcome though?
Yeah, I mean it's a little bleak.
Spoiler.
Spoiler alert. It's all bad.
We haven't talked about smart dust.
Is
it too much to cover right now, or
I'll just do it. So smart dust.
Yeah.
I like smart dust. If you have already listened, just keep listening. It's fine. If you haven't, this is your first time. So it is self-assembling nano robot technology. So through electrical impulse, through command given by a human user or a robot user, any user, you can make smart dust, which in its sort of natural state, where natural is in quotes, it's just dust. It's like dust. Imagine dust, like sand, you know? And then when and I imagine it's happening like at the nano level, like Voltron.
Yeah.
I'll form the head.
Yes.
But like when you give it this impulse, it will harden into like whatever it is that you want. So like I need a Phillips head screwdriver. Oh no, I actually need a flathead screwdriver.
Right.
I don't need 2 screwdrivers. I just need 1 bag of smart dust.
Correct.
And the idea that the smart dust enthusiasts like me like to think about is when the technology is advanced beyond then, and it's like anything that you would need, like smart dust assemble into an iPhone,
right?
You know, smart dust assemble into absolutely anything I need to extend my life. It's like the Swiss armiest of inventions of all time. Like, you know who's really going to be out of luck is the Swiss Army knife makers.
Right.
The Swiss Army. Like, you could probably take over Switzerland when smart dust comes out, right? Because there's going to be no need for a Swiss Army knife when you can do that and more with your smart dust.
Smart dust.
Smart dust. 2018 edition.
Check it out. Still not really moving from it's coming. It's in the future.
It's got the yellow triangle. The yellow triangle means 10 years or more.
Yeah.
So you can, trending and education listeners, you can tune back in 2019, 20, 21, all the way through 2028.
Right.
I sure hope we're doing this in 2028, talking at you about smart dust as you're listening to this on a device made of smart dust.
Smart dust player. Yeah.
I'm gonna drop the mic.
In your learn holes. Yeah.
Right in your learn holes.
Yeah.
I assume the Neuralink will be plugged in by then, so it'll just be piped straight into my brain.
Oh my
Why
God.
wouldn't it be?
I know we're coming up on time, but also like Elon Musk. Like, remember when this started? I mean, like Elon Musk was at the peak of inflated expectations.
He's in the trough.
We were saying, oh my God, Elon, all the new technology, he's ahead of everything. And he's had a bad run. I mean, I feel for the guy. Hopefully he gets some sleep. Hopefully he gets the care that he needs. He stops tweeting so much.
Yes.
But it is interesting that that sort of the personification of emerging technology is actually
that's real meta. You're right.
He's riding the hype cycle, and he's in the trough.
He is in the. Let's hope he's in the trough.
I'm hoping,
because if it's getting worse,
if it go there may be
see you later
sub basements below the trough that he's in. Yeah. But I'm still hoping maybe there's a plateau of productivity in his future.
I do have that as the close here. Mike, to you, is there seems like there are plenty of applications to this cycle outside of technology and to understanding sort of how media goes through this and how movies and businesses, do you see that as you were talking about people trying to be on trend, people staying ahead of trend? It feels like that would be a good exercise for folks to maybe not plot it, but understand where things outside of technology are going through a similar hype cycle. Do you see it the same way?
Yeah, and for me, one thing that I think's on us to figure out for a future show or some way to share out our thoughts is like, we should do our hype cycle for educational technology and learning, because I do think I've seen a few of them out there, but I feel like we could probably take a few stabs, because it does remind me of the distinction between technology-driven solutions and technology-enabled. So, like, depending on which of these tools which of them are most relevant to learning contexts, and then how would we think about plotting any of them around their learning application? So like for example, the AI for everything, the democratization of AI, it's going to have tremendous implications on the digital lesson planning and the way in which you can be training the emerging generations on engaging with artificial intelligence, and also like supplementing great classroom and learning experiences with those technologies. We didn't really cover this from that lens. I think that would be an interesting thing for us to dig into down the road, because I think anyone who's in sort of the solution design space needs to think about these problems as they relate to, these solutions as they relate to the problems that are most relevant to you. I think that's an interesting cut, and that's probably something we should keep looking at.
Brandon, any final thoughts before we say so long?
Oh man, I have so many thoughts. How can any of them be final? I like this time of year. I really hope that listeners who get sort of hyped up by this too engage with the resource and use it as a jumping off point. Like that's as Mike was saying, and I+1, that's what we've done. That the annual Gartner Hype Cycle is at least that often opportunity to learn about what's coming. And I think this is something that's like sort of wistful here, but I think that imagining the future is a both really rewarding and also really important human endeavor. That imagining the future helps make the future happen. So I would enlist as much support from like fellow like-minded people to say take a read through the Hype Cycle and learn about where your world and where your you, if we believe in some of the trends from this year, is going.
This will not be the last you hear about the 2018 Gartner Hype Cycle. We'll talk about it again, to Mike's point, and maybe work on plotting our own for EdTech, education, and learning throughout the rest of this year. As always, great stuff from Mike and Brandon. You can find us on Twitter at Trending in Education. Share us. Share the tweets and share the episodes from iTunes, from Stitcher, from TuneIn, with friends, family, colleagues. Want to extend the conversation. Let us know what you like and what you want to hear more of via Twitter or Facebook, or check us out at trendingineducation.com. With that said, we'll be back next time right here on Trending in Education.